Hello, Ministry Company family. I'm so excited to get to share with you about Ephesians chapter 2. It's just such a rich chapter, and I like what Pastor Pavlo talked about in Ephesians chapter 1 about the grace of God. And the grace of God is just something that pushes through the entire book of Ephesians. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to read from chapter 2, starting in verse 1. And you, he have made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others. So here Paul's talking about the nature of man. Before we come to Christ, we have the same nature as the rest of the world, and we see the world walking in this nature. We see hatred, we see division, we see these things, and it's sin. And the sin, we tend to look at the sin as the problem, but really the sin's just the symptom of the world. The sin is the symptom of living separated from God, being under the dominion of Satan. And I like what it says in verse 1 in the Passion Translation. It says, his fullness fills you. And it's like when we begin to live in that new life, when we live with Christ and we live for Christ, that fullness that he brings pushes all that other stuff out of our life. That sin stops being the symptom because it's filled with things that Christ has set out for us to do. So one thing we kind of do in the church sometimes is we focus on that sin, and we see the people in the world and they're sinning, and we focus there. And we need to get that mindset that sinners are going to sin. Those who aren't in relationship with Christ are going to have sin in their lives. And we can't tell them that their sin is the problem, because that just brings the condemnation. What we need to do is show them the light of Christ. So I'm going to continue in verse 4. But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace in his kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So here we see that revelation, that it's through this grace that God sent through his son Jesus, that we come into his kingdom, that we become part of his beloved, that we come into his family. And in verse 5 verse 3 in the Passion Translation, it says, like, the deeds and desires of our self-life are expressed through the nature that we're living in. So when we come under this nature of grace, when we come under the covering of grace, we begin to reflect to the world Jesus Christ. We become part of his beloved identity. And it says in verse 10 in the Passion Translation, we become his poetry, recreated people, and that we will fulfill the destiny he has given each of us. For we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it. And this brings to remembrance to me parents when they're about to have a child. And the parents talking to each other, talking about the wonderful things that they have planned for that child. And how that when that child's born, that they want to do this with the child, and they want to see the child raised up in this way to do these things. They always have good intentions for their child. And it's the same with God the Father. He has nothing but good intentions for us. And he knows, born into this sin nature, that we're going to have struggles. But that's why he sent Jesus, his son, to be that redemption for us, so that we can walk with him, and that we can fulfill the things that he's had planned before we were even born.